All right. Well, welcome to our podcast, and I'm excited today. I have a good friend and like a mentor of mine, Raymond Harris, joining, and really excited to have Raymond. So Raymond is here in Dallas with me, an architect over 40 years, venture capitalist, and has been involved in a lot of ministries and businesses, and has authored several books, and his latest one, Enduring Wealth, which we'll talk more about, is awesome. Highly recommend. So Raymond, thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Lane. Thanks for having me. This is great.
Yeah, well, I'll just jump right in to the book, and just like we're having conversations at Velvet Taco, I really want people to hear your perspective on giving, because I resonate with it, and I want more people to have this perspective. And so before we get into that, I was just curious. I don't know if I've asked this before, but you shared a little bit about it in your book, and I don't think I even really knew it, but how you even got interested in stewardship and giving well. What's the origin story there?
Well, I would say that I didn't intentionally become a generous person or a steward, if you will. It was kind of an evolution of growing as a believer in Christ, and I became a follower of Christ in college. I was already a believer since about 9 years old, but in college I became serious about my faith. Mary Dell and I got married our senior year in college, and one of the first acts that we did as a married couple was we gave away our largest wedding gift. We felt compelled to give that to the church. And we didn't have anything when we got married, because you got to remember, we're poor college students. And we gave away our first large wedding gift, which was cash. And that started our journey of becoming donors, or what I would call our pathway to stewardship. And primarily learning bit by bit how to be generous. I think God's generous with us, and so we started out with what a lot of kids would do, is try to give away 10%, which we were taught in church that's the tithe. But I was conflicted with that, because I said, why is 10% the standard? And so as I grew up in the faith, and as I got older, and as I became a professional, and God gave me the ability to generate wealth, I said, well, if God owns everything and he's entrusted it to me, why do I give 10%? I realized that really it's all his anyway, and that I am just to take care of it. So it was a process. It was a long journey of stewardship, beginning in college years. And then as my wife and I began to mature as believers and have children and get involved in business, I very slowly became more and more generous. Not because generosity is good, but because we just wanted to take good care of the things that God had given us. The other thing, Lane, that I learned early is that I never took possession of the money that I earned. I only used it. I didn't possess it. So it's really hard to give money when you possess it and when it's yours, and you go, golly, I can use this. When it's not yours and you're just taking care of it, then it's a little easier to give it. So,
Yeah, I love that. But at some point, that transition between being generous and being a steward happened. And I know it's over years of trying to give well, and you talk about some of the difficulties of it in your book. And what was that transit like? Were there specific instances that sparked that, or was it just a culmination of experiences? I'd love to hear more about that.
It's a long journey. I don't think anyone instantly becomes a steward. I think it has to come to the realization we're not taught in church that God owns everything, that we're merely caretakers. What church basically teaches most people is that we have stewardship Sundays. We want to be generous. We want to give to the church. I think most pastors don't have a really good handle on what real stewardship is. Stewardship means that you don't have rights or ownership. And Americans tend to think that they're self-made. Hey, I've gone to school, I've built this business, I've done this by pulling up my bootstraps and working hard. The reality is that if God owns everything, he chooses to give wealth to those that he chooses. And he chooses to give wealth to who he gives to, and it's beyond my understanding why he does that. And it's beyond my understanding why he gives certain men wealth and not others. You say, well, I work really hard. Well, there's a lot of people in the third world that work really, really hard and they still are very poor. And so just because you work hard doesn't necessarily mean you'll be wealthy. Now, there are principles, obviously, in Proverbs that tell us about the benefits of working hard. And that's good to understand that. But once I understood that God entrusts wealth to men and women who he chooses, it's what we do with it that's so important. And so we all hear about the downfall of having wealth because a lot of wealthy people don't use it for the benefit of others. They use it selfishly. And you say, well, then wealth is bad. And no, wealth is actually not bad. If God gives wealth, then that wealth is actually a good gift from God. It's what we do with it that counts and how we use it. And it's my personal conviction that the reason God gives certain men wealth is that he wants that person to take care of his kingdom, or the hands and feet of Christ with the wealth in our hands to take care of the kingdom. So that was, that's a long-winded way of saying it's a journey that I've had to be on for a good number of years that I had to discover. And that discovery came through reading several really good authors like Larry Burkett, Howard Dayton, who both had ministries about finance, but they also had the heart the heart behind how to handle money, not just how to handle money. What is the purpose of it? So those men helped me. And then as I got to be involved with other men in ministry that handled money, then I began to understand like Ron Blue and things like Kingdom Advisors and guys like that really had a handle on money. So it's been a long process. I also realized that when I made money in my firm, I had to do something with it. I either could spend it, I could save it, I could give it to the government, I could give it to my kids, I could squander it, or I could do something with it that built the kingdom that would last well beyond my lifetime. And so I had to go through a process of what do I do with money that I earn or money that I save. It's a hard issue. So,
Yeah. Yeah. And one thing I love, we always talk about what you call economic engines. And you've honestly really redeemed my perspective on business and with this term economic engine. So I'd love to hear more about that, how you came up with that idea. I work with a lot of millennials who want to give well. They're starting these businesses, they're trying to grow them, or they're developing their careers. And I, to be honest, have kind of stolen your term economic engines and helped trying to pass that along and help them have a better perspective on their income and how to use it to sustain ministries and also to encourage ministries to be sustainable.
Yeah.
Tell me more about economic engines.
I would say that I began to really focus on that probably 15 years ago, maybe a little longer than that, between 15 and 20 years ago. You see, I was kind of taught in church and through what I would read that the way a steward or a Christian operated in the kingdom that wasn't in ministry was basically a funder of ministries. And so our purpose was to make money and give it away. And that in and of itself is not bad, but it's not the only way. And so I began to struggle with, why do I work so hard? And then I work so hard to generate income. Then I'm very diligent to save the income. And then I pay taxes on the income. And then why do I give it to others to spend and in some cases waste it? And so it became very frustrating to me to say, is my purpose to give my money away to others to spend? And sometimes they don't spend it very well because they don't know how to handle money very well. Most ministry leaders are not really good at financial matters. It's not a criticism, it's just an observation I've made. So why do I work so hard to give money away? And I began to think, well, that seems to me to be a secular and sacred divide. I make money through secular business to give ministries money to operate. And in God's kingdom, there's not really a sacred and secular divide. So then I began to think, could I use secular business, which is actually very holy in God's economy? Could I use business to become a holy endeavor to fund the kingdom? And could I do it for profit? And then the thought occurred to me is, I don't think that there are not-for-profit organizations in heaven. God owns everything. He created business. God is the greatest capitalist. Why do we not use that idea in building the kingdom? And so as I began to think, well, gosh, if we could build kingdom businesses, economic engines that are self-funding and self-perpetuating, then that's really a pretty good deal. And so I said, well, how do you do that? I thought, well, you use the same principles you do to build any business. It's just what you do with that business to build a kingdom. So we've done things such as being in the movie business, where you say, well, the movie business isn't a ministry. Well, yes, it is, because a lot of ministries want a whole bunch of money to go make a Christian movie. And so what we made were really good movies that had a kingdom impact, and you could make money in the theaters. And so I helped two young men start a movie company that became now truly the largest movie company in the world now for faith-based movies. And in their latest project, Amazon has given them $250 million to do their next project. That's big. That's big business.
Yeah.
Helped start some agricultural projects in Zambia and in the central part of Africa. And those are all for-profit businesses to hire as many people as possible to share the gospel in doing so and to provide good products for the ultra poor. Started a goat business and employs people, provides good food for people, and it provides income so people can send their kids to school. So those are economic engines. My children are economic engines because I put a lot of time into them, and then they go out and create businesses and fund ministries through their efforts. My barber is my favorite economic engine.
Yeah.
And on a barber salary, he supports 3 or 4 missionaries in his home country of Ethiopia. And his 3 daughters are now in the medical profession. So a poor immigrant has made enough money as a barber to send 3 daughters to even the University of Texas. God forbid, but they would.
How could he?
I'm an OU grad, and I know you're an A&M guy. So
Yeah.
anyway, those are economic engines, and so I look for opportunities that we can use business principles, and it could be for profit, it could be not for profit. It doesn't matter. God's kingdom doesn't doesn't differentiate between the two, but businesses and ministries can become sustainable. And I guess another example would be a lot of ministries will give, or excuse me, a lot of people will give money to ministries to help anti-trafficking. So they'll give this money away, and that money will be spent for a good cause of getting women and young boys out of trafficking. But every year or every whatever, they come back for more and more money because their sustainability model is truly just getting people to donate. Well, I know of a young lady in China that decided to help women in sexual bondage and in trafficking to get out of their situation by starting a jewelry company. Well, that's a for-profit business providing extremely high-quality jewelry that Macy's and Kohl's and people like that buy and sell in their stores. They're made by women that come out of the brothels. And So it's a for-profit business doing the exact same thing that ministries do. And so that's another good example of an economic engine. It takes a lot of creativity and hard work, but it can be done. And those with business acumen can do that kind of stuff. So another thing is when Mary Dale and I invest, we try to invest in things that build God's kingdom, but also build it with profit so that we can have money back to reinvest into the kingdom. So that's an economic engine in my definitions. So.
Well, I love it. I love it. It reminds me, I was talking to a guy the other day about how weird generosity is. Like if there's a generosity movement kind of happening, that. And I just think it'd be so weird if there was a spending movement. Spend your money. Whereas there's a generosity movement of give money. I just think that's it's weird. And so I love your perspective on, you just mentioned investments, seeing for-profit nonprofits as kingdom investments. How are they redeeming the world and sustainable financially and all of that? I love that. And you also mentioned, giving well is hard. And we've talked about this. So I'd love to hear how, when you're looking at kingdom investments, particularly through a nonprofit lens, because that's most of our work is through that. We have a couple for-profit things we invest in, but so how do you go navigating, who do I give to? How do I evaluate them? How do I monitor their work? What's your process?
Well, first of all, I'm not smart enough to figure a lot of things out, so I have to rely on the influence and the nudging of the Holy Spirit to know where to go and who to meet, and allow him to make introductions for me through other people. I don't think it's any more holy to build an economic engine than it is to give someone else money to spend. My theory is if a not-for-profit or a ministry can spend my money better than I can what they do, then I would be a fool not to give it to them. But if I can invest that money and do something more than they can or better than they can, then I would be a fool to give it to them. So I look for who can spend the money the best to accomplish what I'm trying to accomplish. And so I look at ministry leaders or projects through the lens of, is the leader a steward? Does he know how to handle money? And does he realize that the money is not his, but he's just taking good care of it? So I pass my stewardship on to another leader and expect him to be a good steward. And if I can find that leader that is a good steward, then I can entrust money to him because he'll take good care of it.
How do you tell if they're a good steward?
Well, you observe what they do with it. You can look at financial statements. You can look at all kinds of stuff, but I think it's basically developing a relationship with that person and getting to know them. And that's one way. I think another way is just, what is their effectiveness? What are they accomplishing? Now, believe you me, I've had more than one ministry tell me that they've saved hundreds of thousands of people or millions of people, or we've impacted 50 million people. And I go, baloney. Come on, dude. I don't believe that. And ministries just have these huge numbers, and they provide nice brochures, and they tell you all the things they do. I don't believe about 90% of it, so I'm very skeptical, of what the impact is on so many ministries. It's usually they use some kind of multiple. Okay, I had one group tell me that they've shown the Jesus film in so many places, and then that started so many churches, and now that we've effectively, I said, well, there's not even that many people in the country. Yeah, it's like you can. Is that multiple? So going back is I try to develop a relationship with, if I'm going to give them serious money. Now, if you're going to just do a little donation, I don't think it's necessary. It's just, but if you want to truly invest in the kingdom and do it well, I think you need to understand if the person you're investing in is the steward and can take care of the kingdom. When I invest in young men, which I do, and it could be for-profit, not-for-profit, I look for three things. I look for young men because they have a long runway. So one of the reasons I liked investing in you, Lane, is that you're a young guy. Secondly, you're a hard worker. I've noticed how hard you worked when you did my evaluation. So I look for guys that are young, hardworking, but they also had to be really, really good at what they do. They have to be experts. They have to be top of their class at what they do. If I can find those three components, then I'll put money on them and then see what they do with it if they're a steward. And it doesn't mean that I can't invest in a 50 or 60-year-old person. We do that as well. But if I'm looking for a true economic engine or something, I really look for the other. I look for a younger person that's hardworking, that's extremely talented or very good at what they do. It's just like any investment. You have to evaluate the investment based on what your parameters are, and ours are those three. The other thing that I mentioned to you before is I look for four things inside a ministry or an organization if I'm going to give them money as opposed to investing in a for-profit situation. That is, are they efficient at how they use money? Now, it doesn't mean that they're cheesy and cheap and they don't pay their people well. It just means, are they efficient with their money? And secondly, is there an effectiveness in what they do? Is there truly an effectiveness? And don't give me a bogus report that you've saved the world. What are you really doing that's effective? Third is, are they indigenous? In other words, do they work at the lowest possible level? So I don't want to pay for someone to come out of college, go to seminary, go to 4 years of language school, and then go on the mission field. I'd rather put the money into locals doing the same work. I can cut a lot of corners cost-wise if I don't have to go through language school or hire people in America and travel, and then they need to come back on furlough all the time, all that kind of stuff. That's very inefficient. But I looked for indigenous. As far down the indigenous ladder as I can go is where I try to fund. And then finally, the fourth thing we look for, I just forgot. I said efficient, effective, indigenous, and
sustainable.
Yeah. And can they keep themselves in business? In other words, I ask ministries this all the time. I said, do you have something to sell as a ministry? And then secondly, who wants to buy it? I mean, are you really selling anything anyone really wants, or are you just keeping yourself busy? And so I look for that sustainability. Do they have something to sell, and is anyone buying it? That's sustainability. Because if it's a service that's demanded or a project that's demanded, then you will have someone willing to buy it, and that means they'll donate to it or they'll actually buy it with actual capital. So that's kind of what I look for. So,
yep. And that's what we advocate for with this platform that's my perspective is nonprofits, for-profits, we're all a means to an end, including all access. We're service. And so it's our job to do what's in the best interest of those who are investing in us. And I think, Raymond, if enough of us, the stewards, the investors, had that perspective, we could really move the needle in some areas and do some amazing things around the world. And
yes. If you could unlock the capital that's being stored right now, you could do a lot. And DAFs, donor advised funds, some foundations, they lock up a lot of money. And I don't know if people have vapor lock or they're scared to invest, but there's a lot of money in the not-for-profit world that's still sitting in accounts waiting to be deployed. And I love financial advisors, but I want to encourage financial advisors to help their clients understand that if they don't deploy that money in the kingdom, it's really not doing any good. Just sitting there churning at 5 to 10% interest so that you can give away more money later. I think God wants the money in the kingdom sooner so he can compound it at 30, 60, or 100% rate of return. God's rate of return is a lot better than ours. You can never match what God can do in this kingdom with your money than what you can do on this earth with your money. You think you're a good investor, but I think God can out multiply us. So,
yeah. Yeah, that is a common problem I'm hearing is with all this money stored in foundations and donor advised funds and elsewhere, a common, I think we've talked about this and you mentioned it in your book, but a common thing I hear from folks is, well, it's hard to find good things to give to.
Absolutely. It's
And
it's
yeah,
just as hard for me to find good places to invest money in the kingdom as it was for me to make the money.
mm,
And I was under the uh, illusion that I could make all this money and then it would be great to sit back and invest in the kingdom. I would just sit back and invest and put it out there. And I realized that I began investing money as soon as I made it. And I was finding it hard to invest it well in the kingdom. Now, everybody clamors for money. Everybody swears that they are the best and that they can use your money. But there's 1.5 million not-for-profits in America right now, all clamoring for the same dollars. And I think a great majority of those ought to go out of business so that the good ones can really deploy more capital in what they do. I think there's a lot of seed corn that's being eaten by ineffective not-for-profits. I really do. So I think we ought to get rid of a lot of it. And
yeah, and
one other thing I will say, and I didn't mean to interrupt you, but one thing I will say, if the tax laws changed dramatically, it might help that situation.
yeah,
If you don't get a write-off, people might say, well, I'm just not going to give money away unless I can find a good place to put it. So,
yep, and that may happen, and if more people had this, I don't know what to call it, not capitalistic, but this redemptive perspective on investing in ministries and ministries as a means to an end, driven by impact and what's most effective, cost efficient, sustainable, indigenous, then the market would be driven by impact. And so the ones who aren't making as much impact would be weeded out.
right.
And that would be a good thing, I think,
It's
on
like
behalf of those in need.
quality. The danger with not-for-profit organizations is they get free money without accountability. They don't have to earn the money. It's just given to them. They don't have to perform. It's just given to them. And then they don't have to account for it. And they say, well, yeah, we do. We send out a report. We have a board and all that. And I said, well, that's all well and good. You can still pull the wool over anyone's eyes with a board and with free money. A real accountability is, are you making something happen with that money? In other words, in business, you've got to make more money than you spend, or you cannot stay in business by definition. Same with ministries. Ministries can stay, or not-for-profits can stay in business forever, even though they don't do anything, if they can just get money to stay in business. So they don't have to be efficient. They don't have to be effective. They don't have to produce anything if they get free money. So, just I just don't like giving people free money to go do good things. I want them to do something effectively. And so that I'm not too harsh on that, because I do give away money, for others to spend. I don't just, quote, invest in for-profit businesses, but I do it both ways, because I think God's kingdom is both. So anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to, you've given a lot of advice for donors. I want to pivot, because I think it's chapter 11 in your book talks about fundraising.
Yeah.
And I think that's a nugget of gold for development directors who are out there interacting with people who want to give well. And I still remember the time when I think it was a Tuesday, we got tacos together like we usually do. And yeah, Taco Tuesday. And I remember you saying, we were talking about this, because we get at All Access bombarded as well, but we were talking about this, and I still remember you saying, Lane, it's Tuesday at 12:30, and I've already been asked 13 times for money since Monday morning. And so I'd love for you to, because I hear some nonprofits listen to this podcast. I'd love for you to share, man, if you were just to give advice to someone whose role is raising money for a great cause, and say it's a really impactful cause, I mean, what's your advice to them?
I don't have a silver bullet for the scenario of fundraising. I originally was going to entitle that particular chapter "The Potholes of Fundraising." Fundraising is a no-win situation, and it's really, really hard on development people, and I understand that. I would not want to do two things in God's kingdom. One is to have to raise personal support to go on staff with someone, and secondly, I would not want to be a development person. But Henry Nouwen had written a nice little booklet called The Spirituality of Fundraising. One of the things he said that really impacted me is he said, number one, the development person must really believe in what he's raising funds for. He has to be totally committed to the cause. It's just not a job. Secondly, that if you're approaching someone to be a part of that ministry or that organization by funding them, it has to be in the best interest of that person, not for the ministry. So if it's not on the heart of that person, then you shouldn't persuade them or bend their arm behind their back or try to coerce them into giving to your organization. It's kind of like do what's best for him. In other words, follow the golden rule. What is best for that person? And then help him figure out where he would best invest. So good development people would be like in the movie that is always shown at Christmas, Christmas on 34th Street or whatever that one is, where the Macy's, where the Santa Claus at Macy's was telling all the customers where it was best to get the toys for their kids because it was best for the customer. And then Macy's took on that philosophy of what's best for the customer would be what's best for us. And so I've taken that philosophy with myself is what's best for the other guy will eventually be what's best for me. And so if development people would look at potential donors and investors as what's best for them, then they will not only do exercise the golden rule, but they'll actually make a good friend. And so my thought is, fundraising is very difficult. And it's I said in the very last part of the chapter, it's a no-win situation because it's so hard. But, God even uses those situations for his glory, and he will use the brokenness of this world for his own purposes. So it's a broken system. It's hard, but God still uses it, and he still accomplishes his purpose. So there's not a silver bullet, and there's not a right way to raise funds. I think that if churches had done a better job in the past, then and they had raised up their congregations better to be individual ministers of the gospel instead of having someone professionally being the minister, then so many not-for-profits wouldn't have rised to the top to take the place of the church. So evangelism, church planting, missionaries, sending out missionaries, those are all done through ministries and not-for-profits, and that really should have come out of the church itself. But the church failed in that, and so a lot of ministries came up. I was raised in the Campus Crusade organization crew, and that was raised up because evangelism wasn't happening on college campuses, and it wasn't happening around the world, and Crew became this huge organization to really, I think, to take the place of where the church had failed. I think Navigators, same thing, Young Life, all began to rise up in the 1940s, 1950s, because the church wasn't doing their job. Well, if the church is doing their job and we as church congregates were doing our job, you wouldn't have that many not-for-profits out there. They'd be taking care of business. But it's the brokenness of our world and the brokenness of church. So anyway,
Yeah.
it's a messy situation. chapter 11 is a messy chapter.
Well, no, I think it's, like I said, I think it's gold for people in this space, the fundraising space. Like I said, even for really good organizations, and it should be hard. I mean, 9 out of 10 startups fail. So if we see ourselves as a means to an end, a service, I mean, there's no guarantee that it's going to work, even if it's a great product or service. Right. So it's what I've found is the best, most funded organizations are not because of their ask or the way they fundraise. They're fundable. And I think that's the way it should be, is just be fundable. And I think God will take care of you from there.
Absolutely. That's exactly right. And that's that efficiency and effectiveness that we all want. And I think, Hudson Taylor said it well. He said, God's work done God's way will never lack God's supply. And I think we so many times ask God to bless what we think he wants done. And we really need just to ask God, what do you want done? And I'll go do it. So,
yeah, absolutely. Well, Raymond, I appreciate you taking the time to share this. I, again, just encourage people to get the book Enduring Wealth by Raymond Harris. Raymond, you've been a blessing in my life, just a mentor of mine, and I really appreciate all of these conversations and the tacos. And it's just been really helpful. And I do pray more people have this same perspective, because I really believe if more of us did, we could accomplish some amazing things in the world, both as the financial equity and sweat equity parts of it come together. So, Raymond, thanks for taking the time to do this.
Thanks for the privilege of being with you.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it, and we'll grab tacos soon. Thanks, Raymond.